Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. One of the things that we learn out of the Ukraine war is that this war is also about narratives. More than the kinetic war that is actually taking place, there's a battle of narratives which is ongoing amongst the mainstream media, the social media, through WhatsApp forwards, and even in our minds, where we really don't know what exactly to believe. To discuss this narrative war, I have with me Brigadier S.K. Chatterjee from bharatshakti.in, who's going to tell us what this narrative war is all about. And of course, we will close this discussion by realizing and understanding what India must do when and if it finds itself in a corner being attacked by this narrative war. Thank you, sir, for joining me for this, I think, very important discussion on the narrative war which is taking place in Ukraine.
Thank you, Aadi. Always nice to be on your platform. Whatever you want to say, if you want to go ahead or you want to shape the question a little more. Shall I go ahead?
Yes.
Right, you talked about narrative. Yes, I would also like to call it a narrative war in some way. And with media being omnipotent today, wherever you go, every issue becomes an issue as shaped by a narrative. And to that extent, you're quite right that none of us are perhaps sure what's really happening. But we know that there's an overpowering narrative, and there's another narrative may not be so overpowering, may not be so powerful, and it gets overpowered. And the guy who has the means of launching himself better has the chance of winning the narratives more. Right. Like I said, West or no West, there's a huge information campaign which is on. Right. And the narrative is the Western narrative, that is all. There's no doubt about it. Russians are, at one stage, they were considered to be the masters of information operations, really. At times it was, at that time, after the Second World War, it was called information warfare, really. And thereafter, the information operations, that terminology came in. And that is primarily an American terminology. But it's nothing very different from information warfare, really. The original concept. But however, they seem to be, playing second fiddle in this whole information business that's working out there. So the battle for information space, I would say, is been won hands down by the Americans. Russians, even when this campaign started, there were slow starters in the information space I'm talking about. I call them slow starters, and they have reasons for it. The reason was they were actually going into an offensive. Whatever be your reason in today's world to justify an offensive action of that proportion as the Russians have undertaken is difficult. It's difficult. So, as such, the information campaign that they had to launch and win ahead of them was a difficult bet to go along with. And they also did not have the kind of infrastructure which the Western countries have. One effect, I would say, of this narrative, Western narrative being powerful, is there are 141 countries in a UN Security Council resolution when it was put to vote, the 141 countries which are against this Russian move. So obviously, they have not been able to put their narrative across to the globe as such. That's why 141 countries are not there with them. So that's what I would say. The information operations or progress of operations also, if you see, the destruction of infrastructure, refugees, special trains going, all kinds of things, school children being killed or a college child being shot within the crossfire or whatever be, all those things have come out from the Western narrative. And it pins down the Russians very badly along the Russian-Ukraine border. That's what I would say to start with.
Oh, absolutely, sir. Whatever said and done, you find that, when we look back into history and we realize what the baseline of this entire issue is, it's not primarily a Russian fault. And it's being portrayed as the factor that the Russians are the devil, especially after Crimea and as well as the action right now. What do you see as an importance of these actions that are being portrayed by the Western narrative, sir?
One issue about the Western narrative that I would like to put across is this, let's say, this bioweapon that they talked about, narrative. Now, whatever may be the reality or whatever may be the threat, as far as the war is concerned, as far as the war is concerned, there's been no bioweapon effect there on ground. So there is no biological weapon which has been actually launched. Nobody's talking about that. But all the same, it pushed the Russians somewhat into a corner. Uh, and there is a sort of an alert for the forces, Ukraine forces. Now, when you talk about bioweapons, etc., there is always an information operations content to it. The United States, the United Kingdom, and amongst others, they have rebuked Russia for in the Security Council meeting on Friday, or last Friday, for discussing such claims that they have those biological weapons which the Americans are funding in Ukraine. But the fact of it is there are about 30 of these biological weapon labs which are there in the Ukraine and which have been funded by this thing. Some of them are into research, into very sophisticated kind of research as well. It's best to leave that. From IO point of view, the issue has got global coverage as far as the issue is concerned. People have got life to it. Now, the fact that some of these labs get American money is also now well known. Now, the labs, if you want to compare it with Wuhan, this particular bioweapons issue with Wuhan, well, I would say, as far as Wuhan labs are concerned, they were in China, funded by China, guided by Chinese leadership, and they produced something which we say is Chinese in origin and which created a huge big problem all over the world. It's not comparable. The two are not really comparable. China, if you recall, had travel bans in place much before, within the country, much before they announced that this kind of a particular virus is out. So the Chinese did a lot of deliberate things. Maybe they miscalculated and did it, but well, the blame goes on them. Over here, the blame really goes on nobody because the weapon has not been used at all. Right.
That's the sad part of it, sir. We actually forgotten, the Chinese issue because of this whole narrative which is being created about the US bioweapon, this thing, and the Russian probable use of chemical and biological weapons. We are actually forgetting a crime that has already been committed, and we are forgetting the millions of lives that have been lost in that entire thing. So I'd like to talk about social media. That's, today the war fighting weapon which is being used for creation of narratives. We see a whole lot which is coming out in social media, and I'll put out a couple of this thing with you. The social media itself is being weaponized against the Russians today, and we can realize it by the kind of videos, by the kind of talks that are being put across. President Zelensky is a very, very clear example of a hero that, I believe he's done a very brave thing by standing up. But his whole image that has been created by the social media narrative, backers of the West, has really changed everything. My question is that something like this is basically, keeping any country vulnerable if it opposes the USA because they really control the entire social media. How do you see this entire situation, sir? Tomorrow, if Zelensky says something wrong, there can be a complete different spin against him as well.
Let me give a broader idea about all media, and then I'll come down to social media. You see, the West has a stranglehold on global communication. Let's face the fact. And there are reasons for it. If you're talking about big communication agencies, etc., it is BBC, it's Voice of America, it's all from the West. It's not the Russian TV, it's not the TASS, it's not them, it's Reuters, it's all Western media controlled by the West, capital from the West, the leadership from the West, the policy from the West, and the picture painted is by a Western painter. It is not the picture which the Russians would like to paint. There's one more reason which goes in favor of the West. See, English language is used globally much more than the Russian language or the Chinese language. And when something comes up on Voice of America or BBC, we also tend to, in the bargain, watch more of Voice of America, much more of BBC, though the Russian channels may be having English programs, but they are, well, perhaps not first-rate program like Fox News or something like that. So there is an audience already created for you from the main media, for propagating your views as far as the West is concerned. Now, when you come to Facebook, Instagram, your question as you started, the social media, WhatsApp, and so on. Now, we have to remember that the Russians are also very dependent on them. Most of the Russian population is on WhatsApp or Instagram. I read a newspaper report only yesterday, which said that Instagram has overtaken WhatsApp. It did not talk about Instagram overtaking some Russian social media platform, but Instagram overtaking WhatsApp. But WhatsApp and Instagram are both again controlled by the West. They are not controlled by Russians. So when you have so much of resources available for putting your message out and putting it wide and far, then I guess you have a tremendous advantage. And whether it is us at the other end tomorrow, or whether it's any other country at the other end tomorrow, we're going to face this problem. Whether it's the Chinese at the other end tomorrow, we're going to face this. The picture that will be painted of us or the Chinese or whosoever be anti the Western world at that point in time will be the picture as painted by the people in the West. However, I had not expected Russians to give in as easily as they have because of one reason. One has also talked about, heard about, even a couple of months, a couple of years back, the manipulation of American presidential elections by Russians. How was that done? That was all again done by media, electronic media, it's social media, it's various other ways. It's all by communicating directly with the people of America that they were trying to do something which, I do not know to what extent have they been successful. So perhaps the Russians did not utilize their social media capabilities and resources globally as much as they should have, is what I would say.
That, of course, is when one compares the effect of their alleged intrusion into the elections versus what they're doing today, they're two different paradigms. I absolutely agree with you, and that's probably an eye opener for people, for Russia watchers in a large way. So narratives, there's a big problem with the narratives that a lot of times the subjects on whom the narrative is being driven tend to believe the narrative that is being put across, and no matter how fake it might be. Do you think that Ukraine today and its leadership today has fallen into that invincibility trap of this narrative, where in their losing their cities, they are probably very eager for a negotiated peace, and of course they know that they're not going to be able to continue the fighting and the resistance for as long as they would like to. So is it that they narratives can also slip back into a point where they make the subject weak itself?
Look, if I am to handle this question a little technically first, when we talk about perception management, that is what narratives are meant for.
Absolutely.
Perception management of a particular segment of your viewers, your listeners, your consumers, whose thinking process you want to influence. We actually talk about perception management being always based on truth. Because if it is not based on truth, the truth proves to be a lie. The truth that you are trying to project as a perception manager proves to be a lie. You will have lost your credibility. And in this business of communication, the man or the organization or the country which is putting it across, putting the narrative across, if that man, that organization or that country loses its credibility with you and me, the viewer, then I'm afraid the narratives will have no relevance. Now, to take off from that point only, that narratives have to be true. Let me say, it's a question of assessment. Your assessment may be different from my assessment. Let me say that Ukrainians have not done too badly. They have done better than they were expected to do. So the narrative that is coming out is not entirely wrong. It's somewhere based on hard facts which are true. Nobody expected the Russians to be fumbling the way they are fumbling. You have an attack coming in from Ahmednev coming in from Belarus and going towards Kiev, and that thing is one vehicle after the other vehicle, tail to toe. That's kind of this thing. Deployment on a single road where they can be taken on by any kind of aircraft, any kind of, let's say, anti-tank weapons or any kind of drones. So obviously the Russians haven't done as well as they were expected to be. No, they are doing well in certain areas, like in Kharkiv. But Kharkiv, the other side of the story is they've almost got to be destroying almost everything. It's become a battle of attrition there in Kharkiv. After a battle of attrition like that, I have a feeling even Russian origin Ukrainians who were supposed to be with the Russians for this kind of operation may lose their support for Russians. When you get my house down, whether you are a Russian or Ukrainian, is not the fact. The fact to me, which is visible, which I have to live with, is the fact that my house is down. Now, uh, well, Russians, I had a feeling, they somehow had a very quick kind of advance into Crimea when they went into about it, and there was not much resistance. And they have got a little complacent and perhaps expected to go fast and they will go like knife through butter, which has not happened. So that narrative that has been posted by the West has the truth always to base it. Now, Ukrainians are also coming home to give battle. That is what shows Zelensky's motivational capability. Now, don't look at Zelensky's talk the way it will appeal to you or me. There's an issue of culture. So, Zelensky comes from a country with a different kind of culture. Perhaps it fits in very well in that kind of a culture. In our culture, somebody wearing a round collar T-shirt as the president and addressing the nation may not be acceptable. But there he is the man, he's another man on the street. That's the impression that he puts across. It's all very well crafted. This is all very well crafted. So that is what I would say. See, there are reports of even 3 to 4 Russian generals who have died in this battle. 3 to 4 Russian generals. So, like, at least for me, a military professional, and for other military professionals, etc., there would be something ticking in my head. What is wrong? Why are they sending so many generals so far forward? Is it that there is no trust relationship between the senior officers in the Russian army and the junior commanders? So the senior commander wants to be right up front to ensure that everything is done properly. Or is it that the equipment, etc., that is there with the junior commanders is inadequate even to, get something like Zelensky's army on its knees? There are this kind of issues, I would say, which matter.
No, I agree with you. So as a matter of fact, the position that he has taken as an inexperienced politician, 4 or 5 years of experience in leading a country besieged by a very large power, is commendable. There is no question about it. And he's rallied his people around. And as a matter of fact, you yourself said that nobody expected the Ukrainians to come out and fight the way they've done, because what happened in 2014 was basically a rollover. And they were not able to stand up to anything. So that is absolutely true. But the sad part is that, Ukrainians are probably today fighting another person's war and destroying their own cities in this entire bargain. Which is something I want to come to next, where in our mainstream media in India, I'm not sure, is it that the only thing which is available today are the videos that are being put out by the Ukrainian propaganda of Ukrainian soldiers and stuff like that. It is basically putting out a lot of information today, which is being supplied by one source. We also saw a big confusion that was created by a gaming video that was claimed to be a dogfight kill, and a lot of the mainstream media put it across, and it was harped upon for a long time within this thing. I'd like to say that the mainstream media needs to be balanced and put out both the claims for the viewer to make a decision as to what they would like to perceive of this. Hasn't the mainstream media in India and of course abroad not fallen a trap to this entire narrative war as well, sir?
Well, the answer is really yes and no. And I'll explain why I say that it's difficult to find the right answer under the circumstances. Yeah. But first thing is, you said that we're consuming, our mainstream media is getting its consumables, which they're putting across to us, from Western media. I have seen the odd reporter from our channel, yes, also there, the odd one. So maybe it's not so totally Western narrative. There's somebody there on the ground and he's doing it. If he's doing a good job, well, then we're getting good news. That's one. And then, you see, there have been editorials in the press, experts communicating with each other, TV debates, etc. Now, free media allows all this kind of a thing. So what you and me are ultimately getting as news about what's happening in Ukraine is actually a balanced viewpoint. Because you get somebody who's pro-Ukraine on our TV channel, you get somebody who's against Ukraine, you get somebody who's pro-Russia, you get somebody against Putin. So put together, we should be with the democratic media available, some boots on the ground there also. And it's the option with this democratic open media is you can take inputs from Russian TV also, you can take inputs from American TV also, you can take it from BBC or you can go to a Russian agency or a French agency. So actually speaking, it is the Indian media houses' own morality which will decide the quality and the in case they have any leanings. If they don't have leanings and if they go straight, I think they have the means available to get hold of the right news and get hold of vetted news. So that's one. Then I would say, if analyzed further, the underdog, in any war, always gathers more sympathy. So what you see that there is an excess of sympathy for Ukraine is because as compared the two of them together, put against each other, Ukraine and Russia, Ukraine is such a David in front of a Goliath. So all of us also, the media houses also, perhaps they are also made by people like you and me. There is a little bit of that little boy is getting banged up unnecessarily, that kind of thing. And the other issue is, it was not the Ukrainians who crossed the border. Whatever may have been the reasons for it, yes, NATO was unnecessarily expanding, let us say, and NATO was trying to push Russia, and Russia had come to a point where it had to react. Now, that's all that it's for strategic thinkers, that kind of a line. What the man on the street really gets to understand is the Russians have attacked Ukraine, not the Ukrainians have attacked Russia. So there will be a sympathy wave over here in our context, in their context. So we'll have to see that way. And if you view it strategically, Ukrainian borders, none of the places, whether it's the ocean, whether it's the sea, or whether it's the land borders, anywhere have you come across a report of Ukrainians having sent even a commando raid across to do
Absolutely,
something.
yes.
They are fighting their battle for their own country and within their own borderlands.
I guess that's what motivates them fighting for their own motherland, and that's something which creates that entire this perception. And we see that in our own army as well. The motivation is because of the motherland and the connect to the motherland, I guess. I absolutely agreed with you, sir. And as a matter of fact, somebody had mentioned to me in one of my talks that Russia had won the war till the time it didn't start the war. The minute it started the war, it actually lost the war. So that's something that somebody had mentioned, and that thing kind of stuck with me till now. It's been there in my mind.
Very right. It's put it very right across to me.
Yes, sir. So my last question to you is, India also has a bit of an issue. For example, right now, if you look at it, Joe Biden, yes, they put out a statement that India is a bit shaky as far as the Quad is concerned. That created a lot of a hangama within Indian media that, Indian relations with the US are not going down. It's this thing. Now, my point is, India can also be at the receiving end of a narrative war. One, how should we prepare for it? Two, what is it that we can do to protect ourselves?
I think that's a very interesting question, and I think that's the most important part of this discussion that we are. How do we, with our resources, cater for this kind of a situation? We can be the Ukraine tomorrow against a coalition or whatever be. So, but how do we protect our interests? Firstly, we have to realize what's this country's national aim, and we have to get our information operation capabilities in tune with that. If your national aim is like you want to be a regional power, you got to have a strong army, you got to have a strong alliances, etc. Whatever you require. In addition to it, you need to have this information warfare part. You have to. If you do not have it, then you are, I'm afraid, not fully prepared to complement that national aim of being a regional power. Want to be a regional power? Please be a media power today. You can be a regional power tomorrow if you start the job today. But if you are there somewhere close to being a regional power and you want to start the media job, then I'm afraid this kind of business takes a lot of time. You can't hurry it up in a day's time. So you might as well start the job today might not have that kind of an influence. I'll give you a couple of examples as we go along. Now, uh, there are lots of things that we have to keep in mind. Let's say this IOR region, the Indian Ocean region, will remain our focus and it was to be part of our capability for media operations. Now, let me give you those examples. Let's say there's an island state, A or B or C, somewhere in the Indian Ocean region, which is close to us, and we are interested in terms of, having greater influence with people of that particular country, and also having some sort of a partnership with them. Now, there are other contestants also in the Indian Ocean region, the Chinese are there, who might want to also be focusing on the same particular uh, island. And so there, and in this island, you will always find two groups. One is with us, the other is with the Chinese. Now, our life case is like Maldives. One is with us, the ruling one, and the opposition is against us. There is an Out India campaign going on. Are we running a media campaign which is strong enough to blow off the Out India campaign from Maldives? We have to have some capabilities. What are the kind of capabilities that you need to have to influence beyond your borders? Well, I think you need a structure, first of all, to do it. And that structure, like you have a military advisor in the NSCS, National Security Council Secretary, you should also have a media advisor there, or call him an information operations advisor, who will be able to define the themes that we have to propagate, and those themes have to be divided, have to be propagated in such countries that we are interested. Let's say Sri Lanka, let's say Maldives, let's say Bangladesh, Nepal, or neighboring countries where we want those themes to be propagated. Now, when you want to propagate those themes, you also need professionals. Me and you can write an article which might hurt Nepalese sensitivity. So you need somebody who's actually in Nepal, who has been studying Nepal for a long, long time to be writing this article. You need newspapers who will actually publish these articles. They're in Nepal, or they're in Bangladesh, or they're in Sri Lanka, or you want to go to the South China Sea, wherever it is. So this kind of a wherewithal, it takes time. Like I told you, that you want to be regional power tomorrow, better work on the wherewithals today. Otherwise, you are a regional power, you feel you can't be till such time you've got information power. So that's what I would say are some of the steps that we can possibly take amongst other things. I would say there's a lot of soft power you can use for it. Use in terms of building your image there. Whether it's Ayurveda, whether it's Bollywood, or you want to use yoga, whatever be it. There's a huge amount of soft power which started getting utilized in terms of projecting India. Because another country, big or small, will not come to you until unless they see some potential in you, or you've already reached that potential of being a regional power. So all these things go to influence. Our aim is also to undertake perception management operations, and you should be able to take it professionally if you have this kind of build-up done. That's the kind of...
Absolutely. So I think you've hit the nail on the spot when you say, especially about the neighborhood. We see issues with Nepal, we see issues in Sri Lanka where, when they direly need something, they run towards India, but when they need something, they go to China. So it's also, and of course, there is a bit of a challenge with regards to the perception of India, in especially in these two countries, which are our neighborhood. And of course, you mentioned Maldives as well. It's a very, very interesting scenario that you put across.
Thank you. If you have to be a regional power, which we should want to be, in fact, then you have to be an information power also. Because information is a very material component of your entire power, national power that you project. All wars are ultimately fought with your entire national power. It's not the army, it's not the diplomacy part of it. It's all put together. It's your economy, it's your capacity at creating a narrative, justifying your action all over, influencing leadership of various countries, etc. Like we're talking about Sri Lanka, etc. So public diplomacy has to come into it. Our public diplomacy. What's public diplomacy? It's basically transparent diplomacy by country for a segment in another country, and done through existing means of communication. It's only then will you be able to see, let's say there's a democratic country whom we want to influence. Now, one way of influencing them is influence just the leader. But that may not be adequate. Ultimately, that leader is dependent on votes for getting himself elected. So you have to influence the people. So use public diplomacy to reach out to the people of that place that is of interest to you, so that they understand what you're doing, that you're coming in as a partner and not like a dragon, Chinese dragon trying to grab as hard as it can and pull them into a debt trap. Here is partnership with us, and there is a debt trap. There is losing your well, independence to some point.
Absolutely. So I think this is a discussion that one must study, and the narrative war which is ongoing in front of us needs to be studied a little more deeply, and lessons need to be taken with regards how to protect yourself and probably what to do in case you want to launch a narrative war of your own. Because at the end of it, the world revolves around perceptions. The one of the biggest examples of a bad perception we see in Pakistan, and so one can actually see what happens when the world starts disbelieving your whole narrative. You can keep harping it doesn't really go down anywhere. But there was a time when this same Pakistan could actually sell the Kashmir narrative across the world, and we faced a lot of music as a backlash. So somewhere down the line, we have learned a little bit, but there's a lot that needs to be learned, as you also mentioned, sir. Thank you so much for joining me, sir, and taking us through and allowing me to be the devil's advocate, as a matter of fact, with regards to this narrative war that is ongoing in Europe. Till next time, sir, for another subject. Jai Hind.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Always an honor to be on your platform. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening.